was the backup. You said he was getting some number one reps. Is that true with Shedeur?
No, I mean, with a young quarterback with Dylan starting, you want to make sure he gets a lot of the reps. Different when you have a veteran like Joe, I would tell you, Tony. But still getting reps in a bunch of periods.
You ever wonder what happens when a franchise gets so desperate for hope they'll tear themselves apart just to feel something? Well, buckle up, because what's happening in Cleveland right now is beyond football. This is human nature colliding with desperation, and the fallout is nuclear. I'm talking about a locker room civil war brewing over a player who hasn't taken a single meaningful snap. Yeah, you heard that right. Not one. And somehow Kevin Stefanski finds himself in the crosshairs of his own team, wondering how everything went sideways this fast. This isn't your typical coaching hot seat story. This runs deeper, way deeper, because when grown men making millions start questioning leadership over potential instead of production, you know something fundamental has broken, and that something might cost Stefanski everything he's built in Cleveland. Let me paint the picture for you. You got veteran players grinding every single day. These dudes put their bodies through hell, collisions that would hospitalize normal people, film study until their eyes bleed, weight room sessions that feel like medieval torture, and through all that pain and sacrifice, they're watching this rookie quarterback stand on the sidelines looking like he just walked off a magazine cover, Shedeur Sanders. The name alone carries weight because of who his daddy is. Deion Sanders raised this kid to be different, to move different, to talk different, to believe he's destined for greatness before proving a damn thing. And you know what? That energy is contagious. It seeps into locker rooms like smoke under a door. Players start watching his college tape during meals, scrolling through his Instagram highlights between meetings, watching him drop absolute dimes on defensive backs who couldn't guard a parking cone. And slowly but surely, the question starts forming in their minds. Why isn't this kid playing? Because in their eyes, Shedeur represents something they've been starving for. Excitement, hope, a reason for fans to actually care about Browns football again. But here's where it gets messy. Football isn't played on Instagram. It's not a highlight reel competition. The NFL is a completely different animal. The speed is stupid fast. The hits come from angles you don't see on film. Defensive coordinators have been studying film since before Shedeur could walk, and they'll exploit every weakness with surgical precision. These aren't college kids out there. These are grown men with families and mortgages who treat football like a violent chess match where the consequences are concussions and broken bones. Kevin Stefanski knows this. He's been around long enough to understand that throwing a rookie into that meat grinder before he's ready can destroy a career faster than a torn ACL, but logic doesn't matter when emotions run the show, and right now, emotions are running the entire Cleveland Browns organization like a runaway freight train with no brakes. The veterans aren't thinking about development curves or learning progressions. They're thinking about wins and losses. They're thinking about their own careers ticking away like sand in an hourglass. Every loss feels personal when you're bleeding on that field week after week. So when they see a potential difference maker holding a clipboard, they start feeling some type of way. Frustrated, angry, confused, like the coaching staff is deliberately sabotaging their chances at success. It doesn't help that Shedeur carries himself with that quiet confidence that either inspires people or pisses them off. No in between. He's not loud or obnoxious, but you can tell he believes he belongs, that he's ready. That swagger bothers some people, especially when you haven't earned your stripes yet, but it also magnetizes others who see that confidence as the missing ingredient this franchise desperately needs. Now let's talk about what's really happening behind closed doors. Sources close to the team are whispering that meetings have gotten tense. Not screaming matches or fistfights, but that uncomfortable tension where eye contact gets avoided and conversations feel forced. You can feel it in the air when trust starts evaporating. Players splitting into factions without even realizing it. One side backing Stefanski's methodical approach, the other side quietly wondering if the coach has lost his fastball. That second group isn't necessarily wrong for feeling frustrated. They've watched this organization cycle through quarterbacks like a Netflix subscriber scrolling past bad movies. Baker Mayfield came in with that swagger and fire, started hot then fizzled like a wet firecracker. Deshaun Watson arrived with that massive contract and even bigger expectations. That situation turned into one of the ugliest quarterback disasters in recent memory. Now here comes Shedeur Sanders with Hall of Fame bloodlines and a social media following that rivals actual superstars. The hype isn't just loud, it's deafening. And here's what makes this situation so volatile. The Browns don't need another controversy right now. They actually had some stability building, defense playing decent, running game showing flashes. The pieces were coming together slowly but surely. Then Shedeur gets drafted and suddenly it's like someone threw a Molotov cocktail into the facility. Everything shifts, conversations change, focus gets divided because Shedeur isn't just a backup quarterback, he's a cultural phenomenon. His name generates clicks and tweets and debates. Every time he throws a pass in practice, someone's filming it and posting it online with some dramatic caption about the future arriving. That constant buzz creates pressure that seeps into everything. Players start wondering if they're wasting time with the current starter. Coaches feel the heat from ownership who see dollar signs in jersey sales. Fans get impatient because they've been patient for decades and it's gotten them absolutely nowhere. The financial piece can't be ignored either. Shedeur Sanders moving to starting quarterback doesn't just change the depth chart, it transforms the entire business model. Ticket sales would explode, merchandise would fly off shelves, national media would suddenly care about Browns games again instead of treating them like background noise. That kind of money talks loud in NFL front offices. Owners start doing math in their heads. Sponsors start making phone calls. Marketing departments start drafting campaigns. And all that external pressure lands right on Stefanski's desk, whether he likes it or not. He's trying to win football games while everyone around him is thinking about revenue streams and media attention. Those are two completely different missions, and trying to balance both is damn near impossible. But let's get real about Kevin Stefanski for a minute. This man isn't some rookie coach who doesn't know what he's doing. He won Coach of the Year. He's rebuilt this roster from scratch. He's dealt with more quarterback chaos than most coaches face in entire careers. So when he says Shedeur needs more time to develop, that's coming from experience, not fear. The problem is experience doesn't trend on social media. Patience doesn't generate headlines. Playing it safe doesn't get fans fired up and buying tickets. So even when Stefanski makes the right football decision, it looks like the wrong business decision. And in today's NFL, those two things are basically impossible to separate. Every choice gets analyzed through multiple lenses: football strategy, media optics, fan reaction, locker room morale, financial impact. It's exhausting just thinking about all the variables these coaches have to juggle. What's really eating at Stefanski, though, is the loss of control. Not control over plays or game plans. Control over the narrative. He's watching his own locker room get influenced by outside noise that has nothing to do with actual football. Players are forming opinions based on Twitter debates and YouTube highlight compilations instead of what they see in practice every day. That's dangerous because it means the foundation of trust is cracking. Once players start questioning their coach's decisions publicly or even privately, it creates fractures that are almost impossible to repair. Stefanski can draw up the perfect game plan, but if half his team thinks he's holding back their best weapon, it doesn't matter. The execution will be half-hearted, the energy will be off, and losses will pile up for reasons that have nothing to do with X's and O's. The Shedeur situation also exposes something deeper about modern football culture. We've become addicted to instant gratification. Nobody wants to wait for anything anymore. Development takes time, but time feels like failure when everyone's screaming for results immediately. College quarterbacks used to sit for years learning NFL offenses before seeing the field. Now, if a rookie isn't starting by week 3, people assume something's wrong. That shift in expectations puts enormous pressure on young players and coaching staffs. It's not about what's best for long-term success anymore. It's about feeding the hype machine right now this second before people lose interest and move on to the next shiny thing. Stefanski's fighting against that current, and it's exhausting because the current is stronger than any one person. And let's be honest about Cleveland's history here. This franchise has a PhD in dysfunction. They've perfected the art of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. They've turned quarterback controversies into an annual tradition like Thanksgiving dinner. So when Shedeur Sanders walks through those doors, carrying all that hype and potential, of course Cleveland finds a way to make it complicated. Of course there's immediate drama, because that's what this franchise does. They take something that should be exciting and promising and somehow twist it into another episode of their never-ending tragedy. Fans have been conditioned to expect disappointment, so they latch onto hope with desperate intensity. That desperation makes everything more volatile because nobody trusts anything good can actually last in Cleveland. The veterans in that locker room have seen this movie before. New hotshot quarterback arrives. Media loses their minds. Expectations skyrocket. Reality punches everyone in the mouth. They've lived through the Baker Mayfield hype cycle. Watch Deshaun Watson's massive contract turn into a nightmare. Now here comes Shedeur with even bigger buzz, and they're supposed to just believe this time will be different. That skepticism is understandable, but it also creates a weird dynamic where players are rooting for success while simultaneously bracing for inevitable failure. That psychological contradiction makes team chemistry nearly impossible because nobody's fully committed to anything. Everyone's protecting themselves emotionally, which means nobody's willing to be vulnerable and trust the process. What Stefanski probably didn't anticipate was how fast the Shedeur hype would infiltrate his own locker room. He expected outside noise. Media hot takes and fan hysteria are part of the job, but when your own players start drinking the Kool-Aid, that's when things get dangerous. Because now it's not just external pressure, it's internal division. Guys taking sides without even meaning to, some defending the coach's plan, others quietly lobbying for change. And that split creates an environment where winning becomes almost secondary to politics. Players start worrying more about who's getting opportunities than executing their own assignments. Energy that should go toward preparation gets wasted on locker room gossip and speculation. That's how teams implode from the inside out. The coaching staff is probably pulling their hair out trying to manage this circus. They've got game plans to install, film to study, opponents to prepare for, but instead they're dealing with questions about why Shedeur isn't playing, defending decisions that shouldn't need defending, trying to keep players focused when half the locker room is distracted by what might happen instead of what is happening. It's like trying to teach calculus in a nightclub. Sure, you can attempt it, but good luck getting anyone to pay attention when the music's blaring and lights are flashing. The Shedeur situation has become that nightclub atmosphere, loud, chaotic, and impossible to ignore no matter how hard you try. Here's what nobody wants to admit though. Maybe the players are actually right. Maybe Stefanski is overthinking this. Maybe Shedeur is ready and the cautious approach is doing more harm than good. Because sometimes talent is undeniable. Sometimes a player just has that thing that can't be taught or measured. That intangible quality that changes games and energizes entire franchises. If Shedeur truly possesses that magic and he's rotting on the bench while the team struggles, that's a legitimate grievance. The veterans aren't wrong for feeling frustrated if they genuinely believe a better option exists and isn't being utilized. Their careers are short, their window for success is closing, so yeah, they're gonna push back against decisions that feel like self-sabotage, even if those decisions make perfect sense from a developmental standpoint. But here's the flip side. What if Stefanski's right? What if throwing Shedeur into the fire destroys his confidence and derails his entire career? What if the kid needs more time to learn NFL defenses and adjust to the speed of the game? What if patience now leads to greatness later? Those are legitimate questions that don't have easy answers, and that's the impossible position Stefanski finds himself in. Damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. Play Shedeur too early and risk ruining him. Wait too long and risk losing the locker room. There's no winning move here, only different versions of losing, and that's before considering the media circus and fan pressure and ownership expectations. Being an NFL head coach has always been hard, but this level of scrutiny and second guessing is absolutely brutal. The sad reality is this situation probably ends badly no matter what happens. If Shedeur plays and struggles, the knives will come out immediately. People will blame Stefanski for not preparing him properly. If Shedeur sits and the team keeps losing, those same people will blame Stefanski for not playing him. And if Shedeur eventually starts and balls out, everyone will ask why he wasn't playing from day one. There's literally no scenario where Stefanski comes out looking good. That's the curse of coaching in Cleveland. You're always one decision away from being crucified regardless of whether that decision was actually correct. The court of public opinion doesn't care about nuance or context. They just want results, and they want them immediately. What makes this even more fascinating is how social media amplifies everything. 20 years ago, this controversy stays mostly contained. Local media covers it. Fans debate at sports bars. But it doesn't become a national obsession. Now every practice clip gets dissected online. Every coach's comment gets twisted into a headline. Every player's facial expression gets analyzed like the Zapruder film. That constant microscope turns minor issues into major controversies because everything gets magnified 1,000 times. Stefanski can't even sneeze without someone creating a thread analyzing what it means for Shedeur's development. That level of scrutiny would drive anyone insane, and it definitely makes coaching decisions 10 times harder than they need to be. The Shedeur Sanders situation ultimately represents everything complicated about modern NFL culture. The collision of old school football values with new age social media dynamics, the tension between player development and instant gratification, the impossible balance between football decisions and business considerations. The challenge of maintaining locker room unity when outside noise is deafening. Kevin Stefanski finds himself at the center of all these competing forces, trying to navigate a path forward that probably doesn't exist. And Cleveland, being Cleveland, will likely find a way to make this messier before it gets better, because that's what this franchise does best. They turn molehills into mountains, and mountains into active volcanoes. So where does this end? Honestly, nobody knows. Maybe Stefanski caves to pressure and starts Shedeur. Maybe he holds firm and the locker room revolt becomes undeniable. Maybe ownership steps in and forces a decision. Maybe Shedeur requests a trade and this whole circus moves to another city. Every outcome seems equally plausible because chaos is the only constant in Cleveland. What we do know is this situation can't sustain itself forever. Something has to give. Either Stefanski's authority or the team's patience, or Shedeur's willingness to wait. The pressure is building like a shaken soda bottle, and eventually that cap is going to explode off, sending sticky mess everywhere. And when it does, the fallout will be spectacular because Cleveland doesn't do anything halfway. They commit fully to dysfunction in ways that would impress Hollywood screenwriters. The real victims here are the fans who just want to watch competitive football without all the drama. They've suffered through decades of disappointment, they've remained loyal through coaching changes and front office disasters and quarterback carousels that would make other fan bases quit entirely. Now they're watching another promising situation devolve into controversy before their eyes. It's exhausting being a Cleveland fan. Every glimmer of hope gets crushed by some new crisis that feels entirely preventable. And the Shedeur situation feels especially frustrating because it should be exciting. A talented young quarterback with pedigree and potential joining a franchise desperate for a savior. That should be cause for celebration, not division. But Cleveland finds a way to complicate even the simplest blessings. Kevin Stefanski probably lies awake at night wondering how it all went sideways so fast. He's trying to build something sustainable, a culture based on preparation and discipline and smart decision making. But sustainable doesn't sell tickets. Sustainable doesn't trend online. Sustainable doesn't satisfy fans who've been waiting 30 years for a championship. They want fireworks, not foundation. They want Shedeur Sanders slinging touchdowns, not learning progressions in practice. And that fundamental disconnect between what fans want and what coaches know is necessary creates friction that's almost impossible to resolve because both sides think they're right and neither side is willing to budge. The locker room dynamic is probably the most dangerous piece of this puzzle. Once players lose faith in their coach, it spreads like cancer. Subtle at first, a rolled eye here, a sarcastic comment there, but eventually it becomes obvious and undeniable. Players stop fighting as hard, execution gets sloppy, energy disappears, and suddenly you're losing games you should win because half the team has mentally checked out. Stefanski's probably watching for those warning signs like a doctor monitoring vital signs on a critical patient. He knows if he loses that locker room, it's over. No amount of X's and O's can save a coach who doesn't have his team's respect and trust. And right now, that trust is hanging by a thread thinner than dental floss. Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders just keeps being himself, working in practice, staying ready, handling the circus with maturity that probably surprises people. Because love him or hate him, the kid was raised for this. Deion Sanders prepared him for spotlight and pressure and scrutiny in ways most players never experience. So while everyone around him loses their minds, Shedeur remains steady. That calmness probably frustrates people even more because it makes him look more ready than the coaching staff claims he is. If he was panicking or struggling, it would justify the wait. But he looks composed and confident, which only fuels the fire of people demanding he play immediately. This whole saga really comes down to one question. Do you prioritize short-term excitement or long-term success? Cleveland has prioritized short-term excitement for decades, and it's gotten them absolutely nowhere. Maybe Stefanski's patient approach is exactly what this franchise needs, even if it's not what fans want. Or maybe the patient approach is just another excuse to avoid taking necessary risks. There's no way to know until time passes and results reveal themselves. But waiting for those answers requires faith, and Cleveland fans ran out of faith somewhere around their 10th consecutive losing season. They're operating on fumes and desperation now. And desperate people make emotional decisions that feel right in the moment, but often lead to disaster. The Kevin Stefanski versus Shedeur Sanders saga is must-watch television whether you're a Browns fan or not. It's got everything: drama, tension, high stakes, impossible choices, and the looming specter of Cleveland's tortured history hanging over everything like a dark cloud that never quite breaks. However this resolves, one thing is certain: it won't be boring, it won't be simple, and it definitely won't make everyone happy, because that's not how things work in Cleveland. They turn everything into a referendum on the franchise's entire existence. A simple quarterback decision becomes a symbol of deeper organizational dysfunction, and round we go, waiting for the explosion that feels inevitable. So keep watching, keep debating, keep refreshing Twitter for the latest updates, because this story is far from over. The pressure keeps building, the tension keeps rising, and sooner or later something's got to give. When it does, we'll all be here watching Cleveland do what Cleveland does best: turn hope into heartbreak in the most spectacular fashion possible. That's the Cleveland Browns experience. And somehow we can't look away.